You look at a famous face you have seen 1,000 times, but this time the camera moves in close, closer than it usually dares, until the screen is filled with one thing: the eyes. They look different in every photo. In one shot, they seem sharp and clear, like a polished gem. In another, they look soft, almost gray, fading into the background. And in a third, they flash with a color that feels impossible, something between gold and the sea. You might think this is just lighting, or makeup, or a trick of the camera lens. You might think it is just a lucky feature that makes a celebrity look good on a magazine cover. But if you think green eyes are just a pretty detail, you are missing the real twist. That color is not paint. It is not a gift that was simply handed down like a family heirloom. It is a biological tightrope walk. Green eyes show up in only about 2% of the world. That means if you are watching a person with green eyes and you think, "Oh, lots of people have that," you are already wrong. By the time you finish hearing this story, you will see how that rare color acts like a spotlight, not on fame, but on a hidden history of survival. The first thing you need to know is that your eyes are lying to you. If you could take that famous green iris apart, layer by layer, looking for the green pigment, you would never find it. It isn't there. There is no green dye in the human body. If you have spent your whole life calling them green, you have been naming an illusion. This is the trap that catches almost everyone. You think eye color is a simple thing, a paint color you either got or didn't. But the truth is much more tense. Green eyes are a balancing act involving a tiny amount of pigment, a specific kind of light bounce, and a genetic dial turned to exactly the right setting. To understand why this famous face looks the way it does, you have to look at the engine under the hood. The iris, the colored ring of the eye, is not a flat disc. It is a mix of tiny particles and light tricks. The main player is melanin, the same pigment that colors skin and hair. In brown eyes, there is a lot of melanin, so the iris absorbs light and looks dark. In blue eyes, there is very little melanin, so light bounces around and scatters back out. This scattering is called Rayleigh scattering, and it is the exact same physics trick that makes the sky look blue. Green eyes sit in a dangerous middle zone. They need moderate melanin, not too much, or they go brown, and not too little, or they go blue. But moderate melanin just gives you a muted gray or hazel. To get the green pop you see on screen, you need a second ingredient. You need a yellow pigment called lipochrome. When you mix that scattered blue light with a layer of yellowish lipochrome, your brain does the math and sees green. It is like mixing blue and yellow paint, except one of the colors is made of light and the other is made of biology. This three-part mix, moderate melanin, Rayleigh scattering, and lipochrome, is incredibly hard to land on by chance. That is why the eyes of the person you are watching are not just a cosmetic feature. They are a statistical miracle, a low probability combination that both parents had to pass along in a very particular way. And this is where the story moves from physics to the deep drama of ancestry. Because to get that specific mix, you need a family line that kept hitting the genetic lottery generation after generation. Ancestry is not just a list of names or a map of countries. It is a record of choices made under pressure. It is people pushed by hunger, pulled by hope, cornered by bad luck, or saved by one brave decision. If green eyes are uncommon, then families with many green-eyed people often share one thing. Their ancestry is linked again and again to Northern, Western, and Central Europe. That is where green eye prevalence rises in a way it does not in the rest of the world. In many places in Asia, Africa, and the Americas, rates fall below 1% because brown eye genetics dominate. But in certain European pockets, the pattern flips. Ireland and Scotland appear in the data as places with very high combined levels of light eyes. In those regions, the percentage of people with blue or green eyes can climb to between 75% and 86%. Iceland and the Netherlands can reach about 11% to 30% for specific light shades. This concentration is not an accident. It is a clue. It tells us that somewhere behind the famous face you see today, a set of ancestors likely came through these specific regions. The drama of this ancestry begins with a mutation that happened about 10,000 years ago. Before that, almost everyone had brown eyes. Then, a single tweak in the DNA changed the setting. This change didn't happen in the eye itself. It happened in a control switch on chromosome 15. There are two genes sitting right next to each other that control this, OCA2 and HARS2. Think of OCA2 as the worker that makes the pigment. It's like a factory foreman inside the iris cells, moving enzymes around to build melanin. If OCA2 works hard, you get brown eyes. But HERC2 is the boss. HERC2 holds the dimmer switch. Inside HERC2, there is a specific spot, a single letter of DNA code called RS-293832 that can turn OCA2 down. If you carry the version of this switch that dims the lights, OCA2 makes less pigment. The factory slows down. The eyes get lighter. This mutation spread through Europe, but it didn't take over the whole world. It stayed recessive. That means it can hide. This is the part that makes family stories so complicated. You can carry the switch for green or blue eyes and never show it. You can have brown eyes yourself, but pass the dimmer switch to your children. If you partner with someone who also carries a hidden switch, your child can end up with eyes that look nothing like yours. That is why green eyes can vanish for generations, then return like a ghost when two carriers meet. Now, imagine the ancestors of the person you are watching. They are not living in a modern city with airplanes and internet. They are living in small, isolated groups. This is where the mini-dramas of genetics play out. One ancestor stands in a region in Northern Europe. They face a problem, maybe a hard winter, or a lack of food, or a need to move to survive. They make a choice to stay in a small community or move to an island. The consequence of that choice is that their family line stays tight. When families stay inside a region and keep marrying inside that region, rare combinations keep showing up. This is called a founder effect. It is like starting a soup with a very specific spice. If the first few people in the group have the green eye variant, that variant becomes common in the whole pot, even if it is rare everywhere else. In places like Ireland and Scotland, geographic isolation worked like a locked door. The water around the islands meant there was less mixing with brown-eyed groups from the Mediterranean or Asia. The gene pool stayed concentrated. This is why a rare trait can become a regional trademark. It explains why, if you see green eyes on a famous person, you immediately suspect a connection to these specific places. The eyes act like a signal, pointing back to those islands and those small founding groups. But there is another layer to this survival story. Why did the green eye mutation survive at all? It didn't make people stronger. It didn't help them hunt. The answer might be hitchhiking. The genetic switch that turns down eye pigment also turns down skin pigment. In cloudy northern lands, lighter skin helped people make more vitamin D from the weak sunlight. That was a life or death advantage. The eye color might have just ridden along, a passenger on the same genetic train. Because the genes for skin and eyes are linked in that same spot on chromosome 15, nature selected for the skin. And the green eyes came along for the ride. So when you look at that famous face, you are seeing a trait that survived because it was lucky, and because it was connected to something the body needed. It is a receipt for a genetic neighborhood where skin lightness had a clear reason to spread. It is a survivor, not because it fought, but because it endured. But the story gets even more tense when we try to predict it. We love to think science has solved everything. We have tools now, like Irisplex, that can look at DNA and predict eye color. For blue and brown eyes in Europeans, these tools are incredibly accurate, over 90%. They look at that GRC2 switch and a few other markers, and they get it right almost every time. But green eyes break the machine. The accuracy for predicting green or hazel eyes drops significantly, sometimes to around 70 or 85%, or even lower, depending on the test. In some non-European populations, the accuracy for these intermediate colors falls even further. Why? Because green is not just one switch, it is polygenic. That means many genes are whispering to the iris at the same time. You have the main switch at HERC2, but you also have modifiers like SLCT24A4 and TYR. You have tiny genetic nudges that add a little more pigment here or a little more yellow there. It is like a combination lock. You can know the first two numbers and still miss the third. Green eyes sit in such a narrow window of pigment that even a tiny genetic shift can push them toward hazel or blue. That is why you can have a DNA test that says likely blue or likely brown, and the person looks in the mirror and sees green. The science is chasing the complexity of the biology. This brings us back to the human element. Think about the person you are watching. Before they were famous, they were just a kid learning how the world works. Maybe they were the only one in their family with that eye color. Maybe relatives made comments, wondering where it came from. Maybe they learned to smile when people called their eyes magic or emerald, even though they didn't feel magic. They felt like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit the box. The green in those eyes is not a single gene. It is a balance, and balance is fragile. It mirrors a life where one wrong step can change everything. If the ancestors had moved south instead of north, the trait might have disappeared. If the family had mixed with a different group, the recessive genes might have stayed hidden forever. The fact that this face is on your screen, looking the way it does, is the result of a chain that could have broken at any step. There is a penalty for not understanding this. If you don't know the mechanism, you can be pushed around by other people's certainty. You might believe the old myth that brown always dominates blue, or that two brown-eyed parents can't have a green-eyed child. That myth causes real pain. It makes people question their own families. It makes mothers worry when a baby is born with a color they didn't expect. But once you know the truth, that brown-eyed parents can carry hidden light eye variants, and that eye color is a mix of many genetic ingredients, the fear goes away. You stop seeing a mistake and start seeing a connection. You see that a single face can carry an old pattern forward, revealing what was hidden in the DNA of the parents. The reward for knowing this is that you get to see the world with sharper eyes. You look at that famous person and you don't just see a celebrity, you see the end of a very long rope. You see the physics of light scattering through a low pigment stroma. You see the yellow tint of lipochrome mixing with the blue. You see the echo of migrations into northern and western Europe. You see the result of isolation in places like Ireland and Scotland. Green eyes are a biological receipt. They are proof that the person's ancestors lived in small groups, survived bottlenecks, and passed down a rare combination of alleles through centuries of silence. The eyes are not a costume, they are a map, and here is the final reversal. We often think of famous people as unique, as if they invented themselves, but this trait, this signature look, is the opposite of unique. It is a shared inheritance. It links the famous person to the grandmother who stayed in the village, to the farmer who crossed the sea, to the distant ancestor who first carried that typo in the HERC2 gene. When the camera zooms in and those green eyes catch the light, they are doing something ancient. They are turning a physical accident into a human connection. The person turns toward the light and the eyes flash, not because they are magic, but because somewhere, long before applause and cameras, a family line kept passing along a rare set of pieces until the recipe finally clicked into place in one famous face. So the next time you see a headline about them, or watch them walk a red carpet, take a second look. Don't just look at the style. Look at the science staring back at you. You will know that you are looking at a 10,000-year-old survivor. You will know that the color is an illusion created by light and structure. And you will know that behind the fame, there is a deep, quiet engine of ancestry that made the whole thing possible. That is the real story. And it is written right there in the green ring of the iris for anyone who knows how to read it.